What's happening, everybody? Mike here at Filmboy24, and thank you for tuning in to yet another delicious episode. Today we are going to discuss the Lomo UPB-1A processing tank, or developing tank. This setup consists of, and this is the UPB-1 model, by the way. It takes the 50 feet of film as opposed to, I don't remember the model number. There's one that's a little bit smaller that takes 30 feet of film. If you're going to shoot Super 8, you want to make sure and get the tank that holds 50 feet of film. There's also a model that I have, another one that holds 100 feet of continuous film that we'll get into at a later date. But for right now, this is the most common and the most popular. These tanks were built, I believe, in the 60s in Russia. But with that, let's go ahead and start talking about it. This is the tank body. It has a locking lid, in so much that it's still kind of loose, but you twist it about half a quarter turn and the lid pops off. Now this is a light tight tank. At least it better be. You're going to have a lot of issues. And it also consists of 3 reels. Now there's 2 spiral reels and 1 top reel. Now they can be used in a combination of ways. One of the reels has a threaded center. One of the reels does not have a threaded center. And the final reel, which is really just a top cover, is just that, a top cover. It's completely flat on one edge, and then it has a male thread on the other side for 35 millimeter film, or 16. Okay, so what you do, if you're going to load this up for one roll of 50-foot roll of Super 8 film, you would simply use the bottom reel. This is the bottom, the one that's threaded, and then you would use the top, sort of the top cap here that holds everything in place. If you're going to load up 2 rolls of Super 8 or 16 millimeter film, then this is your bottom plate always, because it's got the thread. This would be your top cap for roll number 1, which is the other threaded reel. I'm sorry, the other reel, the other spiral reel. Whew, we got through that. And then your top cap, once again, would be this. This is always what you want on the very tippy top. It would be just like this. Now, this is your center post, and it's 2 pieces, and it simply unscrews. There is a bottom portion and a top portion. Now, Mike, why is there 2 portions of the center post? Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to show you why. Because if you're using all 3 of these reels, you're going to need to separate these at some point. You can always, I always start with them together, but when you thread when you start your film on your first reel and you put your top reel on, you're going to have to tighten this guy down just like so, thread your film. Then you need to unscrew this, but you really only you got to unscrew just the top part of it. It can be kind of a pain. Now, I've had to actually take the whole thing out before, unscrew it. You just can't touch this. And by the way, you have to do all this in the dark. And then you just unscrew this, carefully put it back in, and don't do that. There are slots there, there's grooves that your film should be sitting into, so it shouldn't be too big of an issue. Sometimes this will actually unscrew from the bottom section. Then you want to start your second 40 or 50-foot reel here, put this on top, your top cap, and then you will drop this at least once, because you're in the dark. And then you want to thread this guy back down, like so. And then you can reel on your second 50-foot reel of film. Now, the tank comes with this little spacer. Spacer is used for 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter film. I'm not going to get into too much of that today, since I think most people are going to be more interested in the Super 8 aspect. Hey, see, there you go. It came off first try, just the top part. So what we're going to do is I'm going to, oh, and it comes with a manual sometimes. You got to make sure you can try to get a manual. Now the manual is totally in Russian, and I don't read Russian. However, there's lots of pictures, and I love pictures. So it's actually pretty easy to understand just from looking at the pictures, and some of the numbers are the same. So, and I think there's actually some that have been translated out in the world somewhere. And also, a fella named Martin Baumgarten, and I hope I'm saying his name right. He's a plethora of knowledge when it comes to small gauge film like Super 8. He's helped me a lot in regards to processing times and temps and things like that. But he has a blog that I believe an article that he posted, or that's been posted quite a few years ago. I think it's on Filmcorn. If I can find the link, I'll put it in the description, where he actually details a lot of the do's and don'ts and how kind of his instruction manual on these tanks, and it's a wonderful read. So if I can find that, I'm going to put that in the description for you. At any rate, let me reset up the camera, and we're going to load this thing up with a roll of Super 8. Now let's take a look at this. Now, what is this crazy contraption in front of me? Well, it's not really so crazy. It's actually pretty simple. I had my dad just cut out and sort of bevel. It's just a piece of wood, and this is literally just some blue painter's tape. I typically, when I'm going to load my tank, I will take this. This is just pieces of cardboard folded in half, and there's a screw sticking up through a hole in the bottom of this cardboard, and the cardboard is just taped to the wood. This is just so I didn't drill through the wood, which I may do one day. I take the painter's tape and tape it down to the table. Again, I do this in the bathroom when it's completely dark in there, because you have to do this in the total darkness. Now, what I have here is a tiny little screw head. This is just literally screwed down. I think this one is actually into the wood, and a 5/16 bolt sticking up from the other side. So what I would do is, once you have your film out of the cartridge, I set the film reel over the bolt with the sprocket holes facing down, or the perforations down. And I would already have my bottom reel, which, remember, is the one with the thread in it. I would have it resting on this screw head here, just like so, because the bottom of the reel has sort of a little indention in it here. There's nothing sticking out, so it's, when you're trying to do it on a flat surface, it just sort of scrapes. So I put it right on the top of the little screw head here, and you can see when you don't tend to your film properly, it likes to unwind on you. You very simply, hopefully you can see this, the way this is set up, you will take your film and you will put it behind this long curved area here, out through the first slot. So behind, out through the first slot, twist a little, and I always keep the end about even with the end of this curved area here, and then make a little bend and push the film into the second slot there and pull it. Boom. Now what it is, it's behind the curved area, goes out through the first slot, back in through the second slot, and then back to the reel. Then you want to take and you want to spin your reel, kind of keep this down flat, spin your reel, hold this all down nice and pretty, just like this. There's a little groove that you kind of want this film to sit in, and then you want to pull the perfs. Don't pull real hard, just pull the perfs a little bit towards you, kind of sideways like that, and you're done. Basically, that's it to load, to thread it, to start the thread. Now, if I were going to do just one reel, then we would simply use this top cap right here. We'll use this top cover right here. Now, I may go ahead and just do a second reel to show you what that's like. So I'm going to use this one here, which is your other spiral. Now, you have to do this in the dark, don't forget. So a lot of times I'll take my pinky and I'll feel for that little threaded center hole in there, because it's a little harder than you think to get this thing in there properly. And you get this guy in there Tighten it down. Some people probably wear gloves when they do this. I don't. And then you literally just start spinning. And you can see the my reel, it's making noises, sort of just balances on that little screw head. And as you reel, it threads into the grooves. Or as you spin it clockwise. This is opposite of how the 100-foot consecutive reel works. You spin that one counterclockwise for some reason. And that one's even easier to load than these. Now it starts to get a little tough on your hands here towards the end. And then when I get to the end, I start here with this hand here and sort of touch the film and then spin like this until it's in. If it doesn't stay in, you got to force it in easily. Just like that. Now that is completely, totally spooled on. And it sprockets down because the sprocket holes or the perforations are now inside the groove, so the entire viewing area is open to the developing process. Now, this is sort of the tricky part. Now we got to take this center post out, but leave the bottom section in. Now sometimes I'll get my hand in there and try desperately to hold it while I unscrew, and most of the time it doesn't work, like now. I know you could probably use needle nose pliers or something, but I'm too lazy for that. So I just take it out, carefully put it back in. Again, it's down in those grooves pretty well, so as long as you don't really slide this thing around too much, it's not going anywhere. Get it in there tight, and you can see, you know, it started to come out. That's literally just the end there. Just want to push that back in. And we're good to go. Now we want to realign these little flanges here to the front. Remember, you got to do all this in the dark. But after you do it a couple times, it's really not hard to do. I'm going to cut for 1 second. I got to get another roll of film. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. And I have a second roll here. Now the same applies for the second roll. You want the perforations facing down, and I usually just leave this previous reel on here because of the height difference. It still probably should go up even a little higher, but it works fine. So you want to do exactly the same thing that you just did and not get it all twisted up like this. And you want to put the end here just behind that first little curved area, slide it into the groove, bring it to you, pinch a little area here, push it behind that second groove, just like that. And then you want to kind of pull this tip back even. There you go. Take your little center post here and kind of wind it a little. Get that pushed into the slot, like so. Look at that, just like downtown. Then you take your top cover, boom, right over. Look at that. Screw it right down. Tighten it up. And this one, this top cover really shows you whether or not you have an issue or not, because you can see through it way better than you can the other spiral reels. So, and then we just start spinning. Again, you want to hold it at a little bit of an angle with the perforations facing towards you. And you just spin it on. Doesn't take long. Make some funky noises though. Funky noises. Yes, gets a little bit heavy towards the end. And there we go. We're at the last piece, so I usually just let go, keep my finger here so it doesn't unspool, and then just start working it in. So there we have it. So as you can see, through the top reel, it is nice and laid out perfectly. No issues whatsoever. So what do you do from here? Well, we simply take this apart. We move this out of the way for just a second, and it's unspiraling because of that end. We take this off of my table, and we move it out of the way because we're finished with it. And we bring our tank into play. Again, this is unspooling only because I have that end that probably should have just been cut. I can promise you, you're not going to have these kind of issues when you do yours. Well, I can't promise you that, but nice and even. Then we take our light-proof tank, which is hopefully in your darkened room with you. Set your completed double reel into the tank. Set this with the two cutouts closest to the two handles. Counterclockwise, a quarter of a turn. I'm sorry, clockwise, a quarter of a turn, and it stops. Locked. Now what I do now you can turn the lights on, by the way. And what I do, just so I know this is loaded, I take some white gaffer's tape and I tape directly across both sides of the top here. There's going to be no mistake, no turning it, no opening it in the light, and I leave that on there throughout the entire developing process. All right, so you got it loaded up with undeveloped film. Now what? Well, simple. The top area, this is for pouring your developing chemistry. The hose is for dumping your developing chemistry and rinse chemistry. Quite simply, you want to make sure when you are dumping your chemistry back into its bottle, there's sort of a little indentation in the bottom of these tanks, or at least in this one there is. And you always want to make sure when you have this higher than your bottle that you are getting it just right to kind of get the last of that liquid out of there. Because I can't tell you how many times I thought I had it all, and then you give it another good zhuzh and give it a kind of a thing, and boom, another couple liters comes out. So you always want to make sure, try to eyeball it and get used to it before you start dumping liquids, just to know where it's at, where the port is. It's essentially in line with this here, with the bottom. So you want to make sure you get everything out before you pour your next liquid in the tank. Occasionally, it happened to me a few times, this center and all of your reels will they'll start to float a little bit in some of the chemistry and some of your liquids. They become buoyant for some reason. So you want to make sure when you are agitating and whatnot that you keep this center post down, especially if you're using the minimum amount of liquids to cover your film. You always want to make sure this post is down, because I can promise you, and it happens to me for some reason with Fixer more than anything, that if you're not paying attention, or if your finger isn't on this, or you're not holding this down, this whole thing will float up to the top like this. So you just want to keep that down if you can, just something to keep in mind. One thing I will mention is not all of these tanks are created equal, and what I mean by that is I have a couple of these tanks, this particular model, and one of them, when you load the film on, it kind of wants to just keep bundling up on one or two of the, in other words, it doesn't want to finish out to the end of the reel. And what that is these center posts were not always on the actual spirals. The center of them were not always the exact same height. So sometimes you may have to sand those down a little bit to get this to actually come down a little bit microscopically, but you don't want to overdo it. Sand it a little, test it. Sand it a little, test it. Make sure you're sanding it super flat as well. You don't want an angle, and you really got all kinds of problems. And these tanks are expensive enough as it is. You don't want to ruin it and have to buy another one. Martin Baumgarten, I swear I hope I'm saying his name right, but he has an excellent manual, by the way, on using these tanks. He wrote quite a few years back. I believe it's on Film Corn. I'm going to try to dig it up, and I'll put the link to it in the description if I can find it. But he recommends that you don't use the twisting motion to agitate your film like this, and I 100% agree with him. After developing several hundred reels in these things, I learned that when you do this, and this is full of liquid, it essentially sometimes can bind this film. It can cause it to start, touching together. And that's a no-no when you want to get chemistry in between every little piece of film. That's not going to help, especially backwards, and it's going to start unwinding off of your spools. The best way to agitate this is give it a little bit of up and down, a little bit of side to side, and a little bit of left and right, just like that. If you're going to spin it at all, and I do, carefully. Just spin a little and stop. Spin a little and stop. Give it a little this, a little that. Anyway, back to the fluids. These things will hold, depending on the type of film. I did some tests, and in this particular tank, this one holds 50-foot lengths of film in 3 different formats: Super 8, 16 millimeter, and 35 millimeter. It will hold 2 rolls of Super 8. I know I already went over this, but 2 Super 8, 2 16, or 1 35. As far as liquids go, the absolute minimum amount of liquid that you want in this tank to just cover the top of your film is as follows. 1 roll of Super 8, 750 milliliters, 1,000 milliliters would be optimal. 2 rolls of Super 8, 1,200 milliliters minimum, 1,500 milliliters optimal. 1 roll of 16 millimeter, 1,000 milliliters or 1 liter minimum, just to cover the top. 1,200 milliliters optimum. 2 rolls of 16 millimeter, 1,750 milliliters minimum, 2,000 milliliters optimum, or 2 liters, and that last is exactly the same for 1 roll of 35 millimeter, 1,750 and 2 liters. With that, last thing I want to touch on is clean your tank when you're done with it. These are very old tanks, and you want them to last and last and last another 1 or 2 years. So you want to keep them clean. If you develop a lot of film that has rim jet on it, like I do, your rim jet's going to get all over everything. Everything. You're going to open your tank up when you're all finished, and you're going to go like this, and you're going to have that black rim jet all over your hands. It's going to be all in here, and you're not going to be able to see it because of the surface of this is black. You definitely will see it on these, though, especially your top reel. This one really seems to get covered in rim jet, the bottom side of it. Take a toothbrush or a little scrub brush, some hot water, some dishwashing detergent, clean all this stuff out real good. Fill this with dishwashing detergent, and, well, don't fill it with dishwashing detergent or you'd be rinsing it for the next 6 months. Fill it with water, a little dishwashing detergent, and run it through your hose. Kind of clean out the hose real good, and just take 10 minutes and clean your tanks really good. You will thank me later. That's all I have on the UPB-1A processing tank right now. I will be talking about the larger 100-foot continuous reel tank later. So please stay tuned. If you liked this video, please hit the thumbs down. If you hated this video, give me a thumbs up. Or vice versa, whatever. Make sure you subscribe if you want, like my mom did. And leave me a comment. I'll probably answer it more than likely since I only have 1 subscriber. So leave me a comment, and I'll see you on the next go around.